Goofy Historians is the funnest place to learn about history. Or is it the funniest?
Welcome, everybody. This is the Humorous History Podcast for the Goofy Historians. Today, we're going to talk about Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was born in 357 BC in Macedonia, and he died in 323 BC in Babylon at the age of 33, maybe after one party too many. Now, his dad was Philip II of Macedon. He was a king, and his mom was Olympus. She was a witch, I'm pretty sure. Olympia, but sometimes they say Olympus.
Yeah, do they? Okay.
Olympus, like the camera, I think is what it was. Anyway, she was a really interesting, colorful person as well. So we're talking about Alexandra the Great, and anybody that has the word the for a middle name is noteworthy. Think, let's see here. How about Frederick the Great, Winnie the Pooh, on and on and on. Very noteworthy people. So Alex did live up to his name, though. He was pretty darn great. In fact, you could almost say he's a hero to Western civilization. And we'll discuss all that. In this podcast, we're going to endeavor to look at multiple sides in his conflicts and life, and maybe tell a more complete story with a focus on his last major battle, which is called the Battle of Hydaspese. I'm pretty sure I pronounced that correctly. So it's worth a second to give credit to this young man and his military genius. His endeavors have been looked upon as the gold standard for conquerors, and he was some twisted inspiration for people from Caesar to Napoleon and many others. So in the beginning, Alex, you could say, was born into this like mafioso family. Everyone was plotting to kill each other. Philip II, his dad, he was the ultimate badass. Before he was assassinated, Philip II, he got assassinated by one of his, I think, like security guards. But before he died, he managed to redo the whole army. He created the phalanx with their long spears and all that. And he really set the stage for Alex to invade Persia. And Persia by that time was kind of their make-believe enemy to the east. Clearly, Persia, had attacked them a couple hundred years prior to that. So his mom, Olympia, they say she was a spellcaster. And when she first met Philip, she was just a very young thing. And she was able to use her political skills to make things happen. The interesting thing is, it's kind of messed up. She told Alexander the Great, that Philip wasn't really his dad because his dad was a god. I think it was Achilles, some other Greek god. Anyway, so Alex thought that he was, at least half immortal. So there you go. So Alex, if we can jump forward, and Joseph's going to fill in all the details here, but he gets to Persia, and Persia doesn't put up a very good fight. He's undefeated. He goes across Persia. He ends up going to Egypt, and we're skipping a bunch of stuff, but he ends up becoming a pharaoh of Egypt and becoming a god, and created a city called Alexandria in northern Egypt. And that was the headquarters of Ptolemy for probably a couple hundred years until the time of Cleopatra and Julius Caesar, that city. It was a world-class city. It had this light tower that was a wonder of the world, they say. But anyway, so Alex gets finished with that. He's got to continue conquering the whole world. And he gets to this river, and he has this battle. And the battle is called, we said earlier, Hydaspes. And this video is supposed to cover that. But I'm going to skip over the details for right now. We'll get back to that in a minute. But just know that there were elephants. That's right. There were war elephants, lots of war elephants. Anyway, he was successful there, and his troops decided to kind of have a sit down strike. They were tired and they wanted to go home. And they finally convinced Alex to do so. And Joseph's going to cover that in more detail as well. But so on the way home, of course, Alex has to get into all kinds of trouble. And the funny thing about Alex is he always did like crazy dumb stuff and almost got himself killed. And there's times when he almost died of thirst in the desert. And the time when our animation goes over is when he jumped over the wall and the troops had to come save him and whatnot. But there's a lot of funny stuff. Alexander the Great is great. So let's get started with Joseph's side so we can put in some granular detail here. Do you want to talk, Joseph, about kind of what Alexander's personality was? He was not just a great military leader, he was way more than that.
Alexander was quite the character. He had there's a Greek word for it that we don't have in English today. It's a word called pothos. I think that's how you pronounce it. My ancient Greek isn't that good, but what it means is a strong longing, a desire, a need to explore, to see the ends of the earth. Just to go out and do stuff. He can't sit still. He had a need to get to the end of the earth, but he just wasn't going to get to the end of the earth like an explorer. He actually wanted not just to see it, he wanted to conquer it. Right? So he's Alexander the Great, and he really starts the Hellenistic age where he's taking Hellos is Greek, and Greek they don't call themselves Greeks, they call themselves from Hellas, and so he creates a Hellenization of the world, at least the Near East, right? And what he's taking over is the Persian Empire. And the Persian Empire was actually founded by another guy with a middle name, right? It was founded by Cyrus the Great, who actually created the whole Persian Empire. And he's the only one mentioned in the Bible who's not Hebrew that God actually likes, right? Because he sent the Jews home and let them build their temple. And so the Persians get a bad name usually in Western history because they're the ones who fought the Greeks, who were democracy and all of that, and they put a stop to the expansion of the Roman Empire once it gets to Greece, right? They stopped it, and after that, the Persian Empire remains huge. They go all the way from India, the Indus Valley, the Indus River Valley, all the way to Egypt and the Balkans. They just stopped at Greece, right? So it's a huge empire. After the Greek and Persian wars, they do start diminishing a bit. They lose India, right, altogether. And, Egypt wants to go free. So, but they're still huge. And then after the Greco-Persian wars, the Greeks, instead of like staying together, as soon as that Persian-Greco war was over, they started fighting each other. And they beat the shit out of each other until finally Philip says, let's just put a stop to that. Alex's father, he comes down, conquers Greece, conquers the Balkans, and he's beginning to go into Turkey when he dies, right? There's even some rumors that Alex helped him with that demise. But whatever happened, Alex takes over from Philip II, who probably should have been Philip the Great. And I don't know why he doesn't get the in his middle name, but he does. And he doesn't, but Alex does. His son does. His son goes a lot further, but who knows how far Alex would have gone if there wasn't a Philip, right? Maybe. And also, Philip was actually taught by Aristotle. And Aristotle thought he knew where the ends of the earth were, right? He thought the ends of the earth was at the Indus River Valley. He thought the Indus River flowed, if you took it and flowed down the Indus River, you'd end up in the Nile, right? And there's another river he thought that flowed up. It was going to go into the Don River and go into Russia. And after that was, the Great Sea, right? Probably the same sea as the Atlantic. He thought that was it. So Alex had his mindset to do what Cyrus did, but from the other side. He's coming from the west. He's going to go east. He's going to reconquer basically the Persian Empire with Greece now, right? Because Cyrus the Great never had Greece, right? Alexander is starting with Greece already in his pocket. And so the Persian Empire is still there. And the thing is, the Persian Empire was not a bad empire. It was actually a very good empire. It was well, they had roads, they had mail, they had administration, they had taxes. It wasn't, and they weren't hurting anybody. It was actually a pretty well-run empire. It was kind of getting frayed around the edges, but it was a nice empire. And there was nice cities, and they had like 7-Elevens and Starbucks, right? So when Alex went in, right, they hadn't had a war since the Greco-Persian Wars, right? They haven't been fighting anybody for 200 years, or 100 years, right? And then Alex comes in, and he's just had all these wars with Philip, his father. He actually went on all of Philip's campaigns against Greece and the Balkans. Alex was there when he was 11, 12 years old. He grew up on the battlefield, right? So when Alex comes over and starts going into Persia, the Persians have a huge army, but they've never used it, not for 150 years. So Philip comes in, he has like 4 major set piece battles. And he takes all of the middle, he takes the Persian Empire, including Egypt, right? When he goes down to Egypt first, he takes Egypt, becomes an Egyptian god, becomes a pharaoh, right? And then he's captured all of this with these major battles. And the thing is with this, I mean, even though he's a great general, he's coming face to face with, these huge trained armies, right? He's fighting in a civilized realm that he knows, right? He knows that, after he beats these governors of Persia, he doesn't change the system, right? The bureaucracy, the government's already there. So he doesn't have to develop anything. He just keeps what was there. As a matter of fact, even though he's bringing Greek culture, he just adopts Persian culture also, right? He starts dressing like a Persian. He marries Persian wives. He marries Roxana. He learns Persian. He lets all his soldiers, marry Persian wives. They're gone like 8-9 years, right? So, and the other thing I have to say about,
what I was just going to chime in is that in Egypt, it only took him 6 months to become a god.
Yeah, I know.
He was in and out of there in 6 months. And when there's not a lot written about him in the Egyptian hieroglyphics, but there's a few things, and they depict Alexander the Great as clearly an Egyptian. I mean, the dude is Egyptian.
And then he became a Persian god, right? He became a Persian god. And even his soldiers are going, okay, you're taking this a little bit too far, Alex, because we know we grew up with you. You're not a god, man. You're Alex. So I'm getting off the trip. So anyways, what he's done so far is pretty amazing, but it's understandable. The infrastructure's there, right? But now he's at the end, right? And now he has to leave the Persian Empire and cross into what they thought was India. It was actually just Afghanistan and Pakistan today, right? It was the Indus River Valley. And he goes into the Indus River Valley, and all of a sudden there's no infrastructure. There's no overwhelming empire. All there is a bunch of warlords, right? So you can't take on Darius, destroy his army, and then go into Baghdad for 2 weeks for spa treatment, right? Or some other Persian city where there's luxury. Just one warlord after another. You beat one, then you have to beat another, and there's no big city you can go to afterwards. But which was fine, and it was during the monsoon season. So he's up in what they call the Punjab region of India. Which Punjab means that the 5 rivers, it's these 5 rivers that flow down and become the Indus River, which flows down into the Gulf. And so he's going into there, and then so it's wet. He's getting into the people who are fighting with elephants.
Elephants? Did you say elephants? War elephants?
War elephants, right? So he's like,
okay, come on, really? So you're going to use an elephant in a war? You're going to take elephants and dress them up and all kinds of crazy shit and get on top of them and think that's a weapon? What?
Well, so he goes into the upper part of the Punjab first, and he gets in with this Taxilis. It's another kingdom that goes over to his side because he's having a war with oh shit, what's the guy's name? Oh no, I'm gonna ruin it. Ruin the floor. Portus. He's having a war with Portus. And so he says, so he gets in, and this guy says, here, Alex, here's 150 elephants you could use to go fight my enemy, right? And Alex going, I don't know what to do with elephants. What do you want me to do with elephants, right? And so he's like, so
you know what you do with elephants? You eat them.
You don't eat them. You make pets out of them. So but Alex does have 150 elephants. And so he goes down to fight Pontus, who's on the river of the Hydaspes River. And Alex is on one side with his 150 elephants and his 75,000 troops, which at this time is probably only 30% Macedonian, right? He's picked up, followers along the way because nobody really minds that he's taken over their country because he's treating them really well, right? He's getting things back together again. So all the armies of Darius just go over to him and say, we'll fight for you. Yeah. So, but on the other side of the Hydaspes River is Pontus, and he has 200 elephants, and he knows what to do with them. he's been fighting with elephants since he was a little kid.
Come on, that's ridiculous. So we've got 200 elephants facing off against 150 elephants. You know what? This is just ridiculous. What are they going to do with each other? Elephants don't want to. Oh, talk about how they learned how to deal with the elephants. They just open up the columns and the elephants run through.
Yeah. So Alex leaves his elephant. Well, what he does with his elephants, what he's doing is he's trying to learn how to ride them, right? So they're like going up and down on the other side of the river with his elephants, having no clue what they're doing, but they're making lots of noise, right? And so Pontus on the other side goes, oh my God, they're getting their elephants ready to stampede. And Alex is just like someone learning to drive their Pinto, right? He's just causing chaos. And finally, Alex goes, forget the elephants. We don't know what to do with the elephants. We're going to hurt ourselves more. We're going to hurt ourselves more than you hurt anybody else, right? So he like sneaks. But while all these elephants are making all of this noise, right? Pontus is down there waiting for him to attack with his elephant because all the dust and everything, the noise and the screaming of the elephants who don't know what's going on with these untrained Greeks. And so while that's going on, he leaves his elephants making all this ruckus down south. He goes up north, finds a way to get across. He makes a little bridge or some boats, and he takes no elephants. He's not taking his elephants. He goes across the river upstream with his cavalry, his horses, and his Larisses, big spikes. And he comes over, and now he's kind of come down on Pontus from the north without any elephants, right? So finally, Pontus finds out that, oh my God, he's not even across the river, he's up north. So he lines up all his elephants, his 200 elephants, and he has like no cavalry. He has like 20 horses or something on either side of his elephants, and all these soldiers coming up. And what Alex has is he has his army lined up, his troops lined up on foot, and like 300 horses on either side of his troops, right? And it turns out there was like, what Alex is really good at is reading the terrain. So he reads the terrains. He sees like along he taps this river is like this bank, right? Horses don't like elephants, right? So he sends. Let me go get this. He sends his elephants. He sends his horses down this bank where they can't see the elephants. The elephants can't see his cavalry, and they come up behind the elephants, right? And he gets other ones. He comes up and he starts shooting arrows at the horses, and they run out. And then he sends the other guy sends his horses from the other side. Anyways, he scares off all of Pontus's horses. All he has now is his elephants, is his troops, right? With no horses. and then his elephants move up, and then they says, don't shoot the elephants, right? Just shoot the guy who's riding the elephants. Right? So they have all these archers and they have these big Larissa spears. So the elephants come, they kill all the guys riding the elephants, and they wound the elephants' knees. So the elephants freak out. They have nobody to control them. So they just go scatter all over the battlefield, stepping on, the Indian troops as much as the Greek troops. And the Greeks actually know how to, they figured out elephants don't want to step on you because it's not comfortable when you step on a human, especially if they have a big spear. So they just opened up and the elephants ran through the Greeks, and then the Greeks came with the Larissa, and then the people who were left on the river, their elephants finally do come up behind them, and the Pontus's army is surrounded, and they destroy them. Except for Pontus.
You know what I would have done if I was there? I would have done like a cowboy western thing. You know what? All you had to do was train the horses to round up the elephants. Like, just train the horses not to be scared of the elephants, and then you can round them up like a rodeo. I'm kidding. I didn't know that horses were scared of elephants.
Yeah, horses don't like elephants. Well, they stink, I guess. The whole smell. But you come up behind him or on the side of him, and that was Alex's big trick. He never. His horses never went straight at the elephants. Only his men did, and his elephants came. All his 300, 400 horse fighters and archers came up behind, and then they had his other backup troops coming up behind, and had the main troops with this 20. Oh, he did create specifically. They already had 20-foot long spears that they used, right? He added another 5 to 10 feet onto those spears, so that when an elephant comes, right, they have they can stick it in the ground, and then the elephant comes and they take the guy riding off the top, or they get him with an arrow, or they wound the elephant. So the elephants were not used to that type of fighting. But Pontus, unlike Darius, right? Every time Darius faced Alexander and he lost, Darius ran away. Right. To fight another day, right? Every time he was like, and finally at the end, Alexander was just chasing Darius around the Middle East, right? Until he didn't even kill him. His own army killed him, and then gave the body to Alexander, right? Just to say, stop following us. Here, please go home. But Pontus didn't. He stayed in the fight until the end, until Alexander's troops, he was the last elephant on the field even, right? So they surround Pontus. Finally, Pontus gives up. He tries to surrender. He surrenders to the wrong person because Alexander is only 5'3", and he thinks, it would be like a 6-foot tall warrior. So he ends up finally surrendering to the right person. And Alexander says, well, what do you want me to do with you? He goes, well, I want you to make me king of this country. And Pontus goes, yeah. And Alexander goes, you got it. You're king of this country. You're just, you have to pay homage to me, but you're still the king. As a matter of fact, I'm going to expand your realm so it's, twice as big as it used to be, but now you're fighting for me. And
so that was great. That was a pretty good tactical move at that time, but it turned out later that now he's got all that dude's enemies as his enemies, and that makes it tough on the way home. Or maybe you could say it made it exciting on the way home for Alex.
So for Alex, for Pontus says, yeah, come on. It's like this. You think this is the end of the world? You have no clue. This is just the beginning of the world. So he took him east towards the Ganges River Valley, which was another whole Nandus civilization going on. He said, we're just going to go here, go across this desert. And the Nandus people in the Ganges River, they have 9,000 elephants. You think my 200 elephants are fun. Wait till you meet these guys with 9,000 elephants. And Alex is going, oh my God, that's the best news I've ever heard, because it's more worlds to conquer. And Aristotle, you're wrong, right? I'm going to give you a C minus for a change instead of you giving me a C minus. And he says, and beyond the Ganges, there's freaking China. And they really are the center of the world. They have like the Zhou dynasty at that point. It's huge. It's 10 times bigger than the Persians. So they're going, but it was the middle of the monsoon season, right? Even though he has great infrastructure and he has a supply chain, the supply chain hasn't caught up with them yet, right? So their uniforms are old, their sandals are rotten, and they go, we just got to go home, right? So what they did, they had a sit-down strike. One morning, Alexander got up, got on his horse, and said, "We're going to the Ganges River Valley," and everybody just sat down. And says, "We're not going. We're just not going," right? So Alexander went into his tent and pouted for 9 days. He didn't come out of his tent for 9 days because he's so upset about. He goes, "Well, why you guys aren't great, and I am, because you guys are a bunch of sissies." But he comes out of his tent on the 9th day. There's a solar eclipse. He creates some sacrifices to the gods, and the gods tell him, "Alex, go home. Just go home. You're done," right? So he goes, "Yeah, well, I can go home. I'm going to go home, but I'm not going the same way I came, because that looks like I'm retreating, right? I'm not going back the same way. I'm going to, even though my home is northwest, I'm going southeast to get home." And they go, the troops go, "Well, okay, Alex, whatever, just get us home." So they make these boats. They go down the Indus River Valley, right, which is full of Pontus's, the enemies of Pontus, right? So he has to fight through all of these people on their way home. So Alex is happy. They come to this one fort, Matalas, right? And it's like he had divided his army or something, but there's this little fort in Matalas, and his army is going, "Sail past it. Just sail past it, Alex. It's fine. Just leave them alone. We're going to be past this. It's going to be an hour." But no, he jumps out of his boat. He charges this fortification of the Matalas, and nobody follows him. His generals don't follow him. His army doesn't follow him. He charges himself, and he turns around and sees that nobody's following him. And then he gets pissed because nobody's following him. So he actually climbs up on the wall himself, with his sword, and say, "Let's go." And they're going, "No, we're not going, Alex. We're not going. We're not going. We're going home." And so he actually says, "You got to follow me because I'm the leader." And he actually jumps over the wall into the band of enemies. And at that point, everybody goes, "Oh my God, Alex, we need you to get home because you're the only one who knows how to get home." So at that point, they all charge the walls and kill everybody in the fort, rescue Alexander, but not before he gets an arrow through the heart. And they drag him out, and they actually get back to Persia after going through the desert for 5 or 6 months, right? That's the one where it gets the water thing, where there's no water, they're starving of thirst, and finally somebody finds a little bit of brackish water, and they give it to Alexander, and he pours it in the sand and says, "I don't drink until everybody drinks." So he lost more men going through that desert than any of the battles that he went to, which he didn't even have to go to. He could have gone back the way he came. But he finally got up to Persia, where he got to Persepolis, or whatever the city is, and then he has a big party because he's back, and he gets drunk, and then he dies. And that's the end of Alexander. But if he hadn't charged the wall, which didn't need to be charged, much less jump in to a bunch of waiting enemies where he gets, beat up and stabbed, he would have survived. And then what would have happened?
Hi. Hello. Shalom. My name is Haley Beckel, and I look like a ghost right now, but that is not the point. I'm here to thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a like and subscribe to the Goofy Historians. We are always putting out fun and new interesting content. Next month, we have a super cool video in the works, so be on the lookout for that, and make sure you check out the Patreon, because we always have something going on there too. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye!
Goofy Historians is the funnest place to learn about history. Or is it the funniest? Does history repeat itself? Not really. But sometimes it kind of rhymes.